Welcome back to the RinkMasters Podcast. My name is Tyler Kroom, and I'm joined with my good friends, Chris Penner and Noah Dreger, and we're going to be just doing some general NHL discussion, hockey-related discussion. But first, there's been a pressing issue that's kind of popped up here in BC as the public health officials in the province of British Columbia have put some restrictions on sports and daily living here in BC, which I don't have an issue with all of it. I understand that Bonnie Henry is trying to do her best to keep everyone safe and to keep the curve flattened. And unfortunately, that has affected the BCHL. Basically, it's allowing basically anyone under 19 and 20 to be able to still practice. But if you're on a team and you're 19 or 20 years of age, you can't practice with your team. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Before we get into that, Noah, do you want to bring up the article?
Yeah, sure. I'll just pull that up right here. All right. Not sure if you guys can see this, but right here I have on the British Columbia official website. This is on the province-wide restrictions. Goes over a bunch of stuff. So these carry into January 8th. Just so you guys all know. And what it says for sports is that all adult indoor and outdoor team sports for people 19 years of age and older are suspended. So here's a list of a bunch of the stuff that includes. That includes basketball, cheerleading, combat sports, floor hockey, floor ringette, road hockey, ice hockey, ringette, martial arts, netball, team skating, soccer, volleyball, indoor bowling, lawn bowling, curling, lacrosse, hockey, ultimate, rugby, football, baseball, softball. So those are just a bunch of the sports that are included on that. All right. Yeah, so I think that a good place to kind of just start this is by saying I think that this order was just brought in out of necessity. I think that it's one that they'll obviously have to review, especially the BCHL. I think that part of the thought process very much revolved around we're starting to see that there could be an increased risk for team sports, for high intensity stuff. Let's just quickly cut off all adult sports. And then until January 8th, and then in that time, we can maybe look to work with like the BCHL or the WHL, for example, because I'm not sure if we've actually heard it all from the WHL when they're even considering coming back now. So I'm not sure if, Tyler, you know anything about that.
Yeah, as far as I know, I haven't heard an update. I know they want to really push for that January 8th start, but the restrictions will lead into January 8th. So I think there's a good chance it'll get pushed back, but we'll have to wait and see what Commissioner Ron Robinson comes out with and go from there.
Yeah, Chris, do you have anything to kind of add to this conversation about the restrictions here?
Yeah, the restrictions are definitely interesting when you look at it. They pick an age, obviously, of the adults at 19, which obviously makes a big effect on the BCHL. You look at it, it's basically the same age restrictions as, say, the WHL, if you're more familiar with that. You're going to have your 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and then you're going to have your veteran crew of your 19 and 20s. And, I mean, these teams have been practicing and playing some games as of August. So I'm not sure why they're putting restrictions in and not answering specific questions as to why 19 and 20s can't participate in practice. As Bonnie Henry said in her press conference yesterday, that she just basically talked about provincial-wide traveling and stuff when all these teams are wanting to do is practice. So it really, I don't know, makes me shake my head as why she can't give a direct answer as to why 19 and 20s can't practice with their teams. But it's definitely something up for discussion, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'd like to add in too, like when it comes to traveling, these teams, their exhibition games have all been postponed and canceled for, I think, 3 weeks now. So they haven't even been traveling for the last 3 weeks. They've just basically been doing inter-squad games and practices and just doing what they can within their facilities. And also I'd like to add as well that they've had pretty tight protocols for the players as well. So they've been extremely limiting exposure into the community to make sure the billet families are safe, make sure the team's safe. the players that are safe, and just making sure that everything goes according to plan so that they can have some sort of season this year, hopefully at some point. And the BCHL as a league heavily relies on 19 to 20-year-olds, more so than the Western Hockey League. I believe you can have 5 20-year-olds per roster in the BCHL, whereas in the WHL it's only 3. So you can definitely see how that's going to heavily impact the BCHL.
Yeah, I think that in terms of Bonnie Henry, like not answering the question, I think part of that is just that they're still working with those leagues. They're in the process of working through some stuff. Like I know sometimes it's hard. Like if you're in the middle of discussing something with a group or an organization or something, or you're working towards that dialogue, sometimes it's a bit detrimental to them be commenting on the process when you're still trying to figure stuff out, right? Like if you don't necessarily have the specific answers, I know that can be difficult sometimes. I think in this case, it was just, let's just roll these restrictions quickly and then we can deal with it. Because I think, as I mentioned a bit before, I think it was more just an adults in sports kind of thing. And then I think that it was just at the time when they were creating those restrictions, that's a lot of paperwork and stuff to get done. That's a lot of communication with other leagues that are going on. That's not necessarily time when you're rolling out whole new restrictions province-wide to necessarily announce also certain special treatment for certain leagues and stuff, right? So,
well, you see where I'd like to say is that I think I could totally agree with you if it was just solely recreational activity sports. Recreational, it makes sense. It's really hard to regulate recreational activities. And Bonnie Henry had already previously mentioned that you can, when you have like your beer league games, your rec league games. So yeah, there's a lot of, going for beers after the games. There's a lot of mingling in the rink before and after. There's a whole socialized aspect to it. I can understand that, but when it comes to leagues like the BCHL, we're looking at institutions that it's a business. I mean, there's people that their livelihoods are tied into the BCHL here. I think that it's a little short-sighted to make that type of call right now. If you're Bonnie Henry and the public health officials, I don't think that they put enough forethought into how this will affect the BCHL.
yeah, Chris, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I kind of agree with both you guys here. I think if Bonnie Henry she obviously put those restrictions out, like you said, Noah, and it takes a lot to put all these things out, like you said, the paperwork and all that stuff. I think if she can keep these conversations going with the BCHL and figure something out in the next maybe say a week or so, they can, get all these players practicing stuff. Because like Tyler said, the protocols have been very strict and they've done a very good job. Because I don't think we've really seen a big COVID outbreak in the BCHL as of what I've remembered. But I think if they can figure something out in that, I think that would be really good. And if that can happen pretty soon with ongoing dialogue, I don't see an issue with this, but it is a little short-sighted. But if there is still ongoing dialogue, then I don't really have an issue with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is the key. I know. I think that part of the tricky thing, I know for Bonnie Henry, I know for anybody who's watched it, I think that also for her and for the people who are running the press conferences, because that isn't all she does, right? Like she's also actively involved in the communication process, right, with a bunch of different groups. So with that in mind, I think that she is pretty exhausted, right? This has been going on now for almost a year, and she's been doing almost daily briefings, right? So necessarily asking super specific questions about a certain league when you've just rolled out massive province-wide restrictions isn't necessarily going to get the answer that you want anyways. I know sometimes even just when I've had a really rough day, kind of not necessarily into going deep into subjects, I'm kind of just like, I need to sleep now sometimes, right? So
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I'm not saying that's necessarily like a good excuse, but I just think that she has done a really good job, and I think this could just be a case of ongoing dialogue, like Chris said. And if that's the case, I think we owe them the benefit of the doubt. All right. Yeah, so another junior hockey topic, let's stay on that. World Junior Championships coming up.
Yeah. No, it's honestly, I can't wait. I've ever since I was a kid, the week where they have the World Juniors, that's been a staple around the holidays. That's something that, in the crazy 2020 where things have just honestly crap's been hitting the fan all year, and it's been a long year, we finally get a little bit of normality here come around the holidays. So I know I'm really excited for this to come up.
Yeah, for sure. I know Tyler and I were already discussing earlier today. We saw some predictions for some of the teams. And yeah, I think some of them were a little bit disappointing. I remember they didn't even have Taylor Gauthier in the top 3 goaltenders for Canada. I think that's a bit criminal.
Well, this is going to be a little bit of a jab at Puck Empire on Instagram, but I don't think you know how to rate your goalies when it comes to the World Juniors. If you can't have Taylor Gauthier in your at least your top 3, then I think you're not paying attention.
Yeah, who are the other ones again, Tyler?
So for the goaltenders, they had Dylan Grand starting, which Chris has seen a lot of Dylan Grand, and so have we. Grand's a good goaltender. I have no issue with him starting the tournament or being projected to. And then backing up was Bro Shu, and he's a nice goaltender. Another good option. I don't know if I'd put him at a Gauthier. He's coming from a world-class organization where I think it's not hard for a goaltender to really thrive. Whereas Gauthier, he played on a Prince George Cougars team that was definitely struggling throughout this year. And then they had Connor Levi as the third string. And I don't think Levi is a good third string option when you have Gauthier right there.
Well, I mean, yeah, like Gauthier, and I think Chris can talk a bit more about this after, but Gauthier been in the national program now for years. He's made consistent improvements with the Cougars. I think on a relatively shaky Cougars defense, he had a .915 save percentage this year.
I think it was .917 actually. Like it was.
Yeah,
it was
might
good.
have even been a bit higher. So, I mean, that's very good. And I think that he was robbed to not be drafted.
Well, and I believe he played the most games per goaltender in the Western Hockey League last season as well. So he saw a lot of minutes.
Yeah, so I don't know. I personally very much disagree with Taylor Gauthier not even being in the predicted top 3 goaltenders for Team Canada. I think that's also a bit of a slight to the Cougars organization as well. Like they've done such a good job with him. Like he's made consistent year-over-year improvements, and I think that he's really earned a chance to shine for his country.
Well, and the biggest thing that I'd like to point out that I've really seen from Gauthier in the last, he's been here since he was 16. Not just his physical game maturing, but even as a leader off the ice, you've just seen each year Gauthier becoming more and more of a presence in that locker room. And I just think, for a guy like him, he'll do whatever the team needs him to do. He's always willing to do his part. And he comes clutch in big moments. I think Canada's going to regret it if they don't bring him along to the tournament.
Yeah, for sure. So Chris, is there anybody else who stands out from like the Canadian roster at the training camp right now and stuff who you think could really be a star for them at the World Juniors?
I mean, looking at it right now, the best player is, not to be any bias or anything, Connor Zary has been one of the best players in the camp before it got shut down. I believe he was playing on a line with Kirby Doc.
They were dynamic.
Yeah, they were the best line out there. I believe he was playing with Tomasino from Nashville.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, that line was absolutely dynamic in the couple games that they played before the COVID shutdown. So I think he's a guy that a lot of people are going to leave off their rosters just because he doesn't get that attention around the league, just the same as Taylor Gauthier. He doesn't get the attention that he deserves because of, I think, the market he plays in and because of the Cougars' success over the last couple of years hasn't been very good. Going back to Gauthier, I've seen him play all the time in Kamloops, and it's whether you can get to Gauthier early or not. Most of the time, that's not the case. You're grinding away, firing 40, 50 shots on the guy, and he's stopping just about all of them. Yeah. So it's a frustrating game when you have to face him, and I've seen it firsthand plenty of times. So I definitely think he deserves a top a top spot in the net for Team Canada for sure. But that's a guy to keep an eye on for sure is Connor Zary in Canada's camp for sure, because he's getting the
Awesome.
opportunity to play with
Yeah.
top guys.
Oh yeah, and I'm really looking at this top six potentially for Canada. I'm really enjoying it. I think Connor Zary and Dak, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to start as a pair to start the tournament. I think that will be one of the top pairs in the tournament. But also, you can't sleep on a guy like Connor McMichael either. There's plenty of center options for him. You know, he could be centered with Cole Perfetti, potentially Quentin Byfeld. Maverick Bork could be a bit of a wild card this year too. I think he's a player that could come in and really be a surprise in the tournament. One thing I am disappointed to see is that we won't have any Alexis Lafreniere to play for Team Canada this year. I was really hoping that the Rangers would, let him go, and ultimately that's not the case. I understand why. There's more risk with him. He did get a pretty bad injury in the last tournament, so he's going to be their future, right? So I totally get it, but I am disappointed to say the least.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so we're going to look at a couple of the players here in the World Juniors. So we've had a considerable amount of players test positive for COVID-19. That results in them leaving camp and not being able to play for their teams in the tournament. For some teams, it's not going to be as impactful. Like Sweden's got a lot of really good players there. Canada's got no shortage of talent to pick from. Same with the U.S. But a noticeable team that we were just talking about is Germany. So they're not going to have Lucas Raquel or Nino Kinder. Both very important players to the top six for Germany. They provide the offense and complement Tim Stützle. Chris, what type of impact is this going to really have on Germany at this tournament, and what are their chances of making it out of the first pool?
That's like you said, that's an issue, big time issue, because Germany they rely on those top guys to get them through that one game or two games that they need to win in their pool. They don't necessarily care about that game against, say, Canada or US. They know they're not going to win that, but it's those games that they need to win against some of those teams on the lower tier. And without a couple guys like that, that really hurts their chances of, winning that game and getting to the quarterfinals. So that's their goal, is to at least get to the quarterfinals and not have to play in that relegation round against the other team in the other pool. So yeah, that definitely hurts their chances a lot, which it sucks for sure, because that's their kids' lifelong dreams, is to play in the World Juniors. And I don't know any Canadian kid who played hockey that isn't their, dream to be playing for Canada on Christmas. So I can't imagine what they're going through.
No, and that is absolutely, and it's crazy too, because it's COVID-19, and I'm sure for some of these guys there was a level of concern that they might not be able to have the chance to even have the tournament this year. And so now they get that chance, and then some of these kids are getting COVID, and it's just like, that's got to sting. I think that's got to hurt a little bit, eh?
No, big time. It sucks. There's not much else you can say, because it hurts themselves not being able to showcase their talent on a world stage, especially coming from a smaller country and probably not playing in the best league that there is over in Europe. So really being able to show their skill set on the world stage would be awesome, and it hurts their team too, on the team level. So yeah, it's a big blow for Germany and these young kids too.
Yeah, most definitely. And Sweden's another team that's going to be impacted by this. So Detroit Red Wings prospect Albin Grew has now tested positive for COVID-19. So there's a key forward out of the lineup for them. Other noticeable ones, we have William Wallinder. You would have basically completed their top four in the tournament. They've already got Broberg and Soderstrom, so they're good there. But not being able to showcase William Wallinder is definitely going to hurt that defense quite considerably. And they will also be without Eklund. Now, Eklund, to me, he's a rising star in Sweden, and not being able to have him at this tournament is definitely going to be have a bit of a significant impact, I think, in the scoring depth of Sweden's lineup.
Yeah, for sure. All right, why don't we move a bit more towards some NHL action? Right, so there's still a number of top UFAs and RFAs that are unsigned. So Just to list a few names here, we have Matthew Barzal, Mike Hoffman, Sami Vatanen, Zdeno Chara, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Eric Holla, Vince Dunn, Ethan Bear, Anthony Cirelli, and I'm sorry, I forgot Chernak's first name just now. It was like right there.
Eric Chernak.
Eric, there we go. I had it and then I lost it. All right. So out of those players, who do you think is the first to sign?
You see, that's tough because I totally thought that Vatanen would be one of the first to go. He's an excellent two-way defenseman. He's not old. I just don't get it. You know, he to me should have been a highly coveted defenseman option. I would even argue maybe more so than Tyson Barrie, and Tyson Barrie didn't last too long on the market himself either. So that's the one that I find a little bit puzzling. And then following that, I'm a little surprised that Mike Hoffman hasn't found a new home yet either. So it's hard to say. I think the ones that'll take the longest will be Matthew Barzal. I think Barzal, he is probably wanting about $9 million in cap, and right now the Islanders are in a really bad cap spot. I don't think they can make that work unless they can make a few trades, but even then that's extremely limited. So I could totally see it either Barzal sitting out until the next season, or if talks don't go well, maybe a chance that he's moved out for somebody else.
I know in the case of the Islanders, I saw something where they suggest they moved some of their like mid cap kind of guys, kind of like low millions, send them to the minors to save some money. But I was just thinking like to save some money to get Barzal. I'm like, but that just drains their roster, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the issue, right? Is that the Islanders have is that at this point they'll have to drain their roster to get Barzal, and then at that point, does he even want to stay if you drain the roster to that extent? Right?
Well,
like that's part of the question, right? Is if
well, and we've already seen some of the repercussions of this. It kind of forced their hand to move out RFA Devon Taves. They sent him to Colorado for 2 second-round picks. He immediately signs there. So they used that cap space there to re-sign Pulak for 2 more years. But again, that defense takes a significant hit, in my opinion. They still haven't signed back Matt Martin either, and so some key depth players to this team are still waiting for a contract. You know, Lou Lamoriello has his work cut out for him, and no fault of his own. I think some bad contracts and some poor roster managements really kind of hurt his position here. I would also like to say that they couldn't really predict the downturn of Andrew Ladd. So that does make it more significantly difficult because he's making over $6 million to barely even play on the fourth line at this point. So it's going to be a very interesting situation to watch leading up to January. We'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, because the other thing I think about the Islanders that's intriguing is just that it was just how solid they were that they were able to do as well as they were in the playoffs. They've already lost Devon Taves. Didn't they already have a retirement too on defense?
Yeah, Johnny Boychuk.
Yeah, Johnny Boychuk. And then with the predictions that they'll have to either trade away or send down some other key depth players, does Matt Barzal, like I said, does he want to stay in a rebuilding environment? Does he want to even sign a long-term contract in a place like New York? But then he wouldn't probably want to sign a short-term either, because you sign a 2-3 year contract. If New York decides to rebuild, well, then what? Like, you're just saying, yeah, I'll just stay here for the rebuilding and a bit cheaper. Like, I don't know. That just doesn't really make sense to me. Like, it's just a weird situation they have themselves in now too. So,
yeah, like I do think it would make sense if he signed for 2 years. If he signed 2 years, maybe for a little bit of less money, just to see where the team goes and what the situation pans out to be. But in that point, I mean, then you can easily move him out if you're looking to rebuild and Barzal's not wanting to stick around before you end up in a John Tavares 2.0 situation, which definitely could happen if he starts to, you know, keep sticking around, but you fail to assemble a team around him. That's not going to go over well, right? So, Chris, maybe you want to chime in on that a little bit and give your thoughts on the Barzal situation.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at the Islanders cap situation. They, like you said, they have poor roster management. They have a lot of bad contracts, like really bad. And you look at how the Islanders played in the playoffs. It wasn't one line or one guy that did it all. They were a four-line team. They relied on everyone to score and stuff. So if you're sending key guys down that to just clear space for Matt Barzal, I think that really makes a detriment onto the team, and they're not going to be the team they were that did so well in the playoffs this year. So it's an interesting situation for sure, and you don't want to get in the situation where Barzal's signing a contract, and then he's not. After that contract, he's a UFA, and you get nothing. Like
Right.
that's horrible asset management by the Islanders, and to get nothing for a young stud like Matthew Barzal, that's a big issue, and that's just really bad in general. So they gotta either move him now while they have team control, or they, like I said, they got to figure out something. But you can't lose him for nothing. That's for sure. Like to go in free agency.
Yeah, there's
Well-
no better way to really hurt that Islanders fan base to literally have another star center completely walk for absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that would
Well, I
be
was going
killer.
to say, isn't that part of a risk with a short-term deal, though? Like,
It is. It definitely is. But how else can you make it work? Because I think at this point it's really hard to get that long-term deal done.
Yeah.
So, like, I personally would much rather have Barzal playing in my lineup than him out of it, especially in a shortened
Fair enough.
season. Like, right? Because so even say like some of the top teams in their division stumble out of the gate. Well, if you have Barzal and he comes in hot, then it's only a 56 game schedule more than likely, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I believe you want to have Barzal in that lineup, even if it's just for a 1 year deal. Because I believe if he signs a 1 year, he'll be an RFA next year, correct?
I'm not
That
sure
sounds about
on that,
right.
actually.
He's
Right.
only 23 right now.
Yeah, he's only 23, and he didn't sign until he was 20.
Yeah.
So
he played in the dub for
yeah,
a little while.
so he should be an RFA next season. We'll see what happens. I wouldn't put that out of the question, but yeah, interesting times in New York for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe let's move on to another comparable candidate, Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's talk about Dubois. I'm really surprised that he hasn't signed yet. Actually, I thought they would have signed like months ago now. So,
and it's an
I don't know.
interesting take because my theory it was and still is that they're trying to keep some cap free to bring in another top six winger to complete that offense. It's an interesting situation there for them because they currently still have Brandon Dubinsky on the books, but as soon as the season starts, he gets put on the LTIR again. And I think his contract is $5 million or something. So it gives them a lot more money to work with. So
5.8.
5.8.
So I was going
right?
to say, when's the deadline though for signing players to have them play in a season?
I don't think there's really
For RFAs, in a regular RFA, like a regular NHL season, it would be December 1st that they have to sign by. But for this year,
didn't they
with
waive
the
it?
shortened schedule, we don't know.
Well, because I was going to say, depending on when that is, would Columbus essentially play like the first game of the season, no sign Dubois, ship the Dubinsky contract, sign Dubois? Do you think they do that? Are they even able to do that? I don't know. I haven't.
I could see them exploring an option with Ottawa because I think Ottawa is still in a position where they could bring in a couple of draft picks to take on a contract to transition to LTIR. So I was thinking about that. Ottawa and Arizona could both potentially do that. Arizona needs to recruit picks as well because they got penalized for the Taylor Hall debacle and not the Taylor Hall debacle necessarily. Actually, no, they did because they had to move a trade for him. But there was the situation where they were illegally holding combines for prospects.
Yeah,
They lost,
players, yeah.
so they lost picks between the Hall deal and that. So this could be a situation where they bring Dubinsky in, put him on the LTIR, bring in some draft picks with it, kind of like what they did with Marian Hossa, and they did that deal with Chicago, right? So we'll see what happens there. That's an option.
Yeah. I think part of the issue with the Dubois situation is that in the playoffs, he showed that he's the number one center. Before that, it was kind of on the fence, and it's great if he signs for Columbus, right? And he will sign for Columbus, but like, it's great that they'll have that number one center. It's just unfortunate that he suddenly played that well right before the contract negotiations, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, that's great for him. That isn't as great on the organization because
Well, I mean,
I don't
yes
know.
and no.
That's just kind of like, I don't know. It's
Because
tricky. But now I think he upped his value by at least $2 million, probably.
like I don't know if they're necessarily like too baffled by it and upset, because the reality is he's a third overall pick, and I think the organizational need was a top line center, like a real bona fide top line center. So if he can turn into that, then that's perfect, and that just proves that they made the right decision picking him over the projected third overall pick at the time, Jesse Puljujarvi.
Yeah, that was big. I think that's exactly why they brought him in, to be a number one center. And I think this is a way different situation than Matt Barzal. I don't see Pierre-Luc Dubois at all leaving the Columbus Blue Jackets at all. I think he's going to stay for the long term. I think if they get a contract done, I think it will be long term. He's not a guy that is going to want to leave, or that Columbus is really going to want to ship out. He was that number 3 pick for a reason, and he's panned out to be excellent. So I think Pierre-Luc Dubois definitely stays long-term with them. It's just a matter of getting a contract done for sure.
And I totally won't throw it out of the question that, we could probably see Pierre-Luc Dubois do a similar deal to what Braden Point did for Tampa Bay, where if he likes it where he's at, he can take less money to help the team out to play for the team. I wouldn't rule that out of the question at all. No.
Yeah. So
that's true too.
One last talking point here for UFAs and stuff. Zdeno Chara, is he retiring? Is he staying in Boston? Is he leaving Boston?
I think he's leaving Boston. I think Boston kind of wants to make this huge youth movement. It's pretty obvious with the moves that they're making. They're kind of restructuring their roster a little bit. There was a lot of talk that they might move out Jake DeBrusk in order to free cap to help the defense out, to be able to keep potentially Chara. But then they extended him to $3.75 million for a couple more years. So I think Chara is going to find a new home. I'm just not convinced he's sticking around in Boston.
100% agree.
Yeah.
I think Chara is going to keep playing. I don't think he has any plans of retiring at all. As a lot of those old guys do, they get to that age of, what is he, 42 years old, and they want to just keep playing. At that point, they want to keep playing. So I think, Tyler, we discussed this in our Ottawa breakdown that we could actually see Zdeno Chara heading back to Ottawa, and I do seriously think that's a really good potential for that to happen. He helps out the young decor. He fills out a spot to help out Thomas Chabot, play some more minutes, and he can be a really good locker room guy for Ottawa. So I still believe that that's a really good landing spot for him.
No, definitely. And the beauty about Chara is, because of his size and his reach, like, I think a lot of people kind of understate this, but the reason why he's been able to be still significantly effective in the defensive zone and with the transition game is his ability to shield defenders. Once he has the puck, it's very hard to get it away from him. And because of his lengthy legs, his strides, he doesn't need to go 110% in his strides. He makes half the strides that an average NHLer would make, and he's already there, right? So I do believe that when it comes to those aspects, I believe Chara is still a serviceable top 4 defenseman in the NHL. So I don't see there not being any teams interested. I think he's going to have quite a few teams inquiring, especially teams looking to make the playoffs or even potentially win it all.
Yeah. So we have 2 more subjects here to really talk about. One is Florida's goaltending staff, big news, and then also a potential Patrick Laine for Matt Dumba trade. So take your pick. Which do you want to go first?
Let's touch base with the Florida goaltending staff. Today it's been announced that they've revamped their goaltending staff, that they're bringing new concepts to the organization. It's going to be spearheaded by Roberto Luongo, who is an excellent choice to be overseeing the operations there. And they brought in, I'm blanking on his first name, Francois Allaire. They're bringing him in, and he is an excellent goaltending coach. He's responsible for, what Luongo's turned into in his career. He had a big impact with Patrick Roy in Montreal, and then the same thing for Jean-Sebastien Giguère in Anaheim. So this is really good because the Florida Panthers, as we all know, have not been able to develop a goaltender in quite literally forever. I can't remember one goaltender that has made it through successfully in that organization. They, in a way, failed Jacob Markstrom. His career got revamped in Vancouver.
I was going to say, maybe the one success story that I can think of in the last 20-ish years was probably Luongo himself. Maybe you could make a slight argument for that, but
even then, he didn't pop off until he got to Vancouver. Anyway,
that is true. That's the argument against that. He really got really really good in Vancouver, but I mean, he wasn't considered a bust in Florida to the extent that Markstrom was. Is more than I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's very fair. But Chris, maybe do you want to shine a little bit of light on how that's going to impact Sergei Bobrovsky?
Yeah, you guys see the goaltender Luongo was and is the guy who got him there. So they need something out of Sergei Bobrovsky, that's for sure. I'm looking at his stats right now. He played 50 games. His goals against average was 3.23. For a guy who's making $10 million,
it's not good.
And that's bad. That's really bad. And they brought in Bobrovsky to be a guy who could hold the fort for Florida and win them a lot of games. That didn't happen. He needs to be a lot better, and I think they're bringing in those pieces with the Luongo and stuff to really make that $10 million worth it. Because last year that $10 million looked really bad. So I think that should really help Bobrovsky in his development and just go back to his Columbus kind of numbers.
Oh, definitely. And it's a common theme here that I've seen with Bobrovsky dating back to Philly. Once he got to Columbus, that's when he really started to take off. And, they do a really good job there with their goaltenders as we're seeing now with, Jonas Korpisalo and Elvis Merzlikins. So those are two goaltenders that have completely defied the odds this year. And I just think that if this is the right coaching fit for Bobrovsky, I have no reason why he shouldn't turn back to Vezina form. And this is, I don't want to say this is all for an attempt to recover the money that they're going to be putting into him, because if they're putting all this money into Bobrovsky and he's not performing, I mean, this is a failed investment. So this is also to secure the investment with Bobrovsky, but also to secure the future for Spencer Knight. He's a 13th overall pick, and there's already some concerns he might not be as good as we originally had thought. So I think this was really good timing. Put Spencer Knight into this system, and just basically secure the crease for the next 10 to 20 years potentially.
Awesome. Now, Laine Dumba, do you think that's a potential trade that we could see happen?
Yeah, so I saw earlier today that Minnesota is still looking to trade out Matthew Dumba. Winnipeg did state that it's maybe more likely they'll trade out Patrik Laine the season after. However, I still think there's a possibility that this could be a thing because Dumba's going to fit an immediate need within the Winnipeg's organization. Laine will definitely fit a need there in Minnesota. It's a trade that will make sense for both teams. I think if the right deal came up, I wouldn't say it's not a possibility at all. I think even if both teams feel like they're going to get what they want from this deal, I think it could happen.
I mean, isn't that the thing with all trades? If both teams get what they want,
the trade. Well, yes and no. It depends. These are divisional teams, right? So
that is true.
Divisional
although
teams,
not necessarily this year. I know what you're saying. Yeah, they're divisional teams.
This is an anomaly year. On the grand scale of things, Line A and Dunbar, they're going to be around for a lot longer than this year. And just given the fact that they play each other a lot, and I would maybe consider them a divisional rival. If one team feels like they're not getting exactly what they're looking for and need out of the deal, then obviously it's going to be a straight no-go. So that's why I said that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think the biggest question is, does Line A buy into Minnesota? Because I know there's been questions about his like attitude and stuff. There's been questions about how often he played Fortnite and stuff, whether or not that was affecting his play, and like just his consistency. So, like for a move like that, do you think that there needs to be a buy-in from Line A to actually make that feasible from Minnesota? Would they be conversations that you think that Winnipeg would let him have with a team like Minnesota? Or I don't know how that really works for trades, like if that's ever happened, but I don't know. I just think that that's the biggest question mark, right? Because Minnesota, they've just been kind of the poster team for mediocrity in a sense, right? Like they're never bad potentially, but they're also never really good. So does he feel a sense of winning there? I don't know. That's just my question.
I personally believe that Minnesota is heading in a good direction right now. Like we look at the draft that they've had the last couple of years and some of the players that they've moved in. They've improved their center depth in the organization right now as it stands. Kirill Kaprizov is a very good player, so I think he's going to come in and be a breath of fresh air in that top six. I don't know if I'm lying. He doesn't have much wiggle room here. I don't believe he has any clauses in his contract that would really give him that much control on where he's going to go.
Does he want, like, does Minnesota want a player who doesn't necessarily want to buy in? That was kind of just more that I was getting at. Like, not necessarily if he had a choice in going, but if Minnesota would take that risk.
I think you take the chance, yeah, because if you bring him in and if he buys in right away, then absolutely. But if he's not a good fit, then Minnesota can very easily just go turn around and move him out for another piece. I don't think it's that big of an issue. I think if Line A truly just wants to play hockey and he's truly looking to be the best he can be, I don't think Minnesota is going to be a bad option going forward for him, especially with a guy like Marco Rossi coming up the system as well.
Yeah, so I had one last thing before we head off to the interview. But so Tyler, do you see, like, I saw a bunch of predictions here. It was, who do a bunch of these hockey channels have for the Calder this year? And the majority had Kaprizov winning the Calder this year. Do you see that happening?
I would see it being no different than Artemi Panarin winning the Calder when he joined the Chicago Blackhawks. They're roughly about the same age. So
I was going to say, how old is Kaprizov?
I believe he's 23, so they're about the same age. Panarin might have been a year or two older, but
I thought Panarin was like 25. Well, yeah, he's almost 30 now.
Potentially 1 or 2 years older when he entered the league, but that's still at that point they're kind of the same player. But I also wouldn't count out Lafreniere. I think it's foolish to think that Kaprizov has a significantly better chance at winning the Calder over Alexis Lafreniere.
I think that the question is, like, I know Panarin winning it was, I know it wasn't well received by a lot of people. As he was going up against, just 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds. Like, is that really fair? So I think it's a bit closer with Kaprizov, but I wonder if they give an edge to somebody like Lafreniere if they're comparable merely because Lafreniere is younger.
I think, a rookie's a rookie at this point. If the rules state that you can be 25 and win the Calder, I think you've won it fair and square. But I do understand the concern that fans have, because in their minds, okay, well, if he's been playing 2-3 years over in Russia in the KHL, but hasn't, when the competition that he's up against has played CHL or college, up until that point, I can kind of get it. But then what do you say for a player that has played 2 or 3 years in the American Hockey League, who's then in the running for a Calder, as opposed to a player that's played 2 or 3 years over in Russia? Because at this point, I would honestly consider the American Hockey League to be a better talent pool than the KHL.
Yeah, fair enough. So
that's the argument.
No, that was just a bit of food for thought. So yeah, do you have anything to add there, Chris? Or
No, I kind of agree with you guys, especially the AHL, KHL kind of point. It's both a professional league. It doesn't really get like looked down on as much when a guy comes up from the AHL as a rookie and then is in the race for the Calder. But I, in my opinion, I believe Lafreniere is the front runner for this. But Kaprizov can definitely be someone who can give him a run for his money and is going to get a lot of ice time in Minnesota too. Yeah. With that team, and he could definitely be a top player for him this year for sure.
All right, sweet. Tyler, why don't you run us into the interview here?
All right, so I had a pleasure to sit down with Zack Hayes. He was a captain for the Prince Albert Raiders. He was a Western Hockey League champion, and I really hope you guys enjoy this interview. All right, so welcome, Zack Hayes, to the RinkMasters Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, COVID has certainly changed the game this year. And have you had any access to any rinks or facilities for any training for your upcoming season?
So we did at the beginning, or when that first lockdown happened, there was no rinks, like everything was shut down, as probably was across the whole country. But then things opened up and we were able to skate. But then now in Alberta, they've shut everything back down. So you're allowed to skate, but only if it's one-on-one.
Oh, so only one-on-one, eh?
Yeah. So then you're paying $175 an ice time.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. So we're waiting for, hopefully things ease up a little bit and we can get back to skating, but that doesn't sound like it'll be anytime soon.
Yeah, and so, that's a lot unfortunate because you signed with the Henderson Silver Knights to play this season. So do you know what that's looking like? Is there going to be a season this year, or are we looking more towards next season?
From what it sounds like, they want to have a season next year, or this year, It's supposed to start in February. So who knows how that goes, especially with the vaccine getting pumped out pretty soon. So it kind of depends, and we're waiting to see on the NHL as well. Like the NHL has their standstills, so like they're still negotiating contracts or money or something like that. So it kind of depends on how that turns out. But it sounds like we're supposed to start February 4th.
Yeah, that'd be definitely good to see that happen. And so we're gonna go back a little bit. So here in Prince George, it's a smaller city. So within minor hockey, we grow up in the system, and a lot of us, like a lot of people playing minor hockey, kind of know each other. It's got this small town feel. So you grew up in Calgary. What was it like playing minor hockey in a bigger city like Calgary?
Well, I didn't really know anything different. So like it changes like every year. There's always like, you don't know who the guys are usually, like from team to team, and teams fluctuate so much, like, and there was a lot of politics in the minor hockey leagues. So it definitely, like, I didn't really know any different. I think it was a good experience though, because there were so many kids that you had to fight and earn your spots on your teams.
Definitely. And so, leading up to the Bantam draft, did you know or have any idea that you were going to get drafted? Were you talking to any teams? Because I see that you went in the 9th round. So what was like on draft day?
Well, I went to school. My parents told me that I had to go to school. I didn't really have any thoughts on whether I was going to get drafted or not. I talked to a couple teams, didn't really know what was going to happen. And then I was in school and in science class when I was like, my teacher was super strict, so I'm doing this with my phone, trying to look and see. And then like through the first couple rounds, my teachers let me on my phone and stream it. And I kind of had a feeling that I probably wasn't going to go in the first couple rounds unless there was a surprise. Right. And then luckily I was able to get picked in the 9th round by PA.
That's really cool. And so you go to training camp. Can you walk us through your first experience at Prince Albert Raiders training camp?
It's a pretty cool experience, like being able to come into camp and at 14 or 15 years old and you're playing against 20-year-olds and
Yeah.
kind of looking up to guys. And like I always went to Hitman games growing up, so like seeing guys that you watch that I've been watching for the past 3-4 years and being able to be on the same ice as them was pretty cool.
And yes, when you're at that camp, so you got to watch these guys play a little bit growing up, going to Hitman games. Who really showed you the ropes during your first training camp?
Well, I knew a couple guys like Sean Montgomery. My dad knew his dad pretty well, so I kind of knew like a couple guys from before, and then there was a couple Calgary guys. So, but I didn't really know anyone right off the bat, so I kind of just did it myself. Kind of just went with the flow. I knew I couldn't make the team that year, but I just wanted to try and get as far as possible, and I was lucky enough to be invited from rookie camp to main camp, so that was pretty cool to be able to skate with them and play games.
Yeah, well, you certainly made a good impression there because you were in Prince Albert your entire Western Hockey League career.
Yeah.
So what was it like being a part of the organization for those 4 years leading up to then ultimately winning a championship with the team?
Yeah. Like going into my first year is like my 16-year-old year. I could start there. I got called up as a 16-year-old for the last 3 weeks and playoffs of the playoffs the last 3 weeks, and then however far they went into playoffs. So that was a pretty cool experience. I learned a lot. When I went there, I was able to play a game, and then I knew what I needed to improve on over the summer, which was I needed to lose some weight and I needed to be quicker and I need to be a better skater. So I went back, did power skating, worked hard in the gym, lost 20 pounds, and then showed up to camp, and they were very surprised with like how I turned out, and they kind of told me that it was my spot to lose the year before. So that was pretty good. And then our team wasn't very good that year.
Yeah.
But we had fun coming to the rink every day. Our coach made it fun, like Habshide made it really fun coming to the rink every day. Didn't yell at us when we needed to, but then also made sure that we wanted to come to the rink. And I think that really helped from that year to the next year to the championship season. He just makes coming to the rink fun every day, no matter what. And then like, especially the year that we won, he was hard on us, but it was fun because we were winning every game.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's definitely that's a key component because, like, it's definitely not as easy to really bring your A game to the rink, even when you're going through a tough stretch when, you're not enjoying it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a key component.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you went to Anaheim Ducks training camp. How did that happen? Like, did just some scouts like reach out to you, or what was that like?
So during the season, my agent said he was talking with a couple teams, and he wanted to wait and see. Like we wanted to wait and see till after the draft if something was to happen, and then we kind of knew where we were. If I wasn't to get drafted, that I was going to go to Anaheim. We told them that. So then didn't get drafted, went to Anaheim camp, and they kind of just kept in touch with my agent throughout the year. So then I went to their development camp and then did good enough there that they invited me back to their rookie training camp. And then I was able to stick around and did the rookie tournament there, and then got invited to main camp, and then stuck around there for a while, and then got sent down to San Diego for their 2 exhibition games before the season, and then ended up getting sent home after that.
And so when you got sent home after those final couple games with San Diego, was that kind of it with your chance with the Anaheim organization, or did talks continue on?
Well, they had offered me an AHL contract, and I felt like I had the opportunity to earn an NHL contract coming back from my 20-year-old in junior. So I declined the AHL offer. And then so we told them that we would sign an NHL deal, but they obviously didn't feel the same way. Right. So I ended up going back, and then I'm not 100% sure on if talks ever continued or how that went. To kind of just leave the agent.
Fair enough. And so, Yeah, and then ultimately that led with you. You had a really good season this last year. Unfortunately, it got cut short before the playoffs could happen. And you got to wear the C. What was it like? Having your final year leading the team and just carrying on from that success you guys had the season prior.
Yeah, I think I really learned from the old captains of the team. And like even the year before, Braden Pahalma was my D partner, and he was the captain the year that we won. And I think I learned a lot from him. And then we knew how to win at that point. So I think with being named captain, I just wanted to pass my knowledge along to the rest of the guys, the new guys, and try and keep that culture that we built in PA. We wanted to keep that culture, and hopefully they go on and win a couple more championships with the culture that we've built over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and Prince Albert certainly has a really good chance. I was looking through the roster and some of the guys they have there. It was a young team last year, but you couldn't tell. You definitely couldn't tell. Yeah, they're good.
They'll be good over the next couple of years.
Definitely. So no, this year they had because we couldn't really play, we could have Memorial Cup, so the CHL put together the Memorial E Cup, and you got to represent the Raiders in that tournament. That's something totally new. So what was that like?
Oh, well, I kind of just assumed I would get pushed under the rug a little bit, just being aged out now. But then in the group chat, they were talking about it, and no one was really wanting to play. And so then I was like, well, if no one wants to do it, I'll do it. Like, I'm not doing nothing else with my life right now, just working out and practicing video games, basically.
Yeah.
Getting out and doing other stuff, but like everything's shut down, so you can't really do anything unless it's outside.
Oh, exactly.
So then they said that, we asked and you're able to play. So I was able to do that, and it's pretty cool. It's a pretty fun experience.
Yeah, that definitely looked like a lot of fun. I know, I'm from Prince George, so I'm a Cougars fan. I got to watch Majid Kadora represent the Cougars, and man, that game against the Oil Kings was super close.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah. And so, going back to kind of playing in Prince Albert, what was it like to play in a small market like Prince Albert?
I definitely enjoyed it. My parents both grew up in small towns, so we always went back there, and I like the small town feel. And Prince Albert's not a small town by any means. I think they're the third biggest in Saskatchewan, but
oh, really?
It's small, but it's small compared to Calgary.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So it's I like that we were able to do a lot of things that probably most teams wouldn't be able to do, like teams in Calgary, teams in Edmonton, those big cities. We did a lot of things that those teams probably wouldn't be able to do.
Right. That's pretty cool. And so my buddy Jordan, he's a diehard Prince Albert Raiders fan. So he wanted me to ask you this question. He wants to know, what did you like about playing at the Art Hauser?
I like the atmosphere around it. Like definitely over the last the winning season, that season probably you have to be there to understand how loud it is. Like in a game,
right?
Like it's so hard to describe, and it feels like there's 20,000 people in there when there's 4,000.
That sounds really cool. I know. So in Prince George, the Prince George Spruce Kings in the BCHL, they went on a huge run, and they won the Fred Page Cup, which is the league championship, and they went on to win the Doyle Cup, and they got to the national championship, which is like their version of the Memorial Cup. And so I don't know how much the Art Hauser seats, but here at the one is at the Coliseum, the RMCA, it's it doesn't fit a lot of people. Like I think it's slightly under 2,200, right? Like 2,200. So we packed that out, and it was right. Like it felt like there was more than 20,000 people in there. Like there's nothing like it.
Yeah, it's crazy being in those small rinks and having them sold out. There's nothing better.
Oh, exactly. All right. So yeah, that's definitely all of my questions. Well, thank you for coming on for this interview.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Have a great night, and I definitely hope to have you on again in the future.
Yeah, thanks. Let me know.
For sure. That was our interview with Zack Hayes, and we hope to see you guys next week. Like, share, comment. Go follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Also give us a like on Facebook. We hope to see you next week.